to do. I am leaving, and this is starting to feel like it's right before my eyes, and I can taste it. It's my sweet beginning. I can tell just what you want. You don't want to be alone. You don't want to be alone. I can't say it's what you know, but you known it the whole time. Yeah, you known it the whole time. Maybe next year I'll have no time to think about the questions to address. Am I the one to try to stop the fire? I wouldn't test you, I'm not the best you could have attained. Why try anything? I will get there. Just remember, I know that I can tell just what you want. You don't want to be alone. You don't want to be alone. And I can't say it's what you know, but you known it the whole time. Yeah, you known it the whole time. I can tell just what you want. You don't want to be alone. You don't want to be alone. And I can't say it's what you know, but you known it the whole time. Yeah, you known it the whole time. So sentimental, not sentimental, no. Romantic, not disgusting yet. Darling, I'm down and lonely. When with the fortunate only. I've been looking for something else. Chocolate, let's go slowly. Discouraged, distant from other interests. On your favorite weekend, and this love for gentlemen only. That's with the fortunate only. No, I gotta be someone else. These days it comes and goes. A list of mania. Think less but see it grow. Like a ride, oh. Not easily offended. Know how to let it go. From a mess to the masses. A list of mania. Think less but see it grow. Like a ride, oh. Not easily offended. Know how to let it go. From a mess to the masses. A list of mania. Think less but see it grow. Like a ride, oh. Not easily offended. Know how to let it go. From a mess to the masses. Follow misguided, stand still. Discuss, discouraged. On this precious weekend, and in this love for gentlemen only. Wealthiest gentlemen only. But now that you're lonely, too late. Chocolate, let's go slowly. Discouraged, we'll burn the pictures instead. When it's all over, we can barely discuss for 1 minute only. Not with a fortunate only. Thought it could have been something else. These days it comes and goes. A list of mania. Think less but see it grow. Like a ride, oh. Not easily offended. Know how to let it go. From a mess to the masses. A list of mania. Think less but see it grow. Like a ride, oh. Not easily offended. magical. With me she'd say everything you want to dream away. We are legends every day. That's what she told me.
Good morning. Welcome to day 2. I'm Crystal Bashirs Duncan with the Office of Innovation, and we are, again, just so excited that you're here. This morning is a treat, really. You're going to hear from some leaders and also have an opportunity to celebrate Schools of Innovation with us. And this morning, our leaders will really continue the framework of living your vision. So today, an emphasis on growth and success. So our first leader this morning is Dr. George Philhower. George has been with our team since the beginning. So it's really an honor to welcome him on the stage this morning. He's a superintendent at Eastern Hancock Schools in Indiana. Now listen to this part. George envisions a world where all children wake up excited to go to school each day because they know when they get there, they will be safe and feel free to be themselves. Wow. They will engage in meaningful learning activities, experience success, play and learn with their friends, and experience the love of trusted adults at their school. Please welcome Dr. George Philhower to the stage. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks, Crystal. So you signed up for an innovation conference, right? So one thing I want to point out to begin with is that if it isn't better, it's not innovation. So the theme of today, the theme of the last 2 days, is live your vision. And what the leaders at the OIE team have done is they've asked you to frame better through the lens of 4 things: joy, connection, growth, and success. And yesterday you learned a lot about joy and connection, and today we're going to talk a little bit about growth and success. So what I want you to do first, before I get started, is I'd like you to stand up. Yesterday you started the day with your eyes closed, so we're going to do that again today. Close your eyes. Point your finger pointer in the air, and I want you to make a half turn clockwise. Go ahead and do it. Half turn clockwise. Careful with your eyes closed. And I live in Indiana, which is northeast of here, so point northeast. Go for it, right now. All right, open your eyes. All right, thank you very much. Go ahead and have a seat. So here's the problem with vision, right? Is that we all, if you're driving to my school and I said ready, set, go, and that's all I did, we would all be thinking we're heading northeast. We'd all be driving towards Greenfield, Indiana, but we'd be going in all sorts of directions. And by the looks of things, we'd all be running into each other, right? So the most important thing we can do is to set our vision. So also, the theme of this conference this year is live your vision. It's not set a vision. It's not think about a vision. It's set a vision. There's a guy named Derek Severs that said something that I think is very important. He said, if information is all we needed, we would all be six-pack billionaires, right? We'd all be billionaires with six-packs. So if all we need is the information you're going to learn today, then we would all be set. Our kids would have nothing to worry about. Our communities would be thriving as soon as you learn the information you're going to learn today. But the hard part is we're going to have to do something with the information that we learned today. So I'm going to challenge you, before we even talk about growth a little bit, to think about not just this vision setting, but the living part that happens tomorrow when you get back to school. So growth. So I heard this recently. 40 to 60% of instructional minutes are spent on things the kids already know, right? How does that make you feel? The first thing it makes me think about is this is probably not right, right? But then I also think, well, if it's not right, like 40 to 60% may not be correct, but what number am I okay with? Am I okay with 10 to 15? Like, what is the number that I'm okay with? I challenge you to go back to your school and to talk to your kids and your teachers about this stat and try to think about what number is accurate in your school. That's a conversation we're having at Eastern Hancock. And here's the warning that I've got for you. I'm not about to tell you everything you need to know how to fix this problem. I think we can all admit that this is probably a problem in your district, whether it's 10% or 60%. But I don't have the answers. The reason that I'm up here talking to you is I need as many thought partners as I can get to help me think about how to solve this issue. And I think we couldn't find ourselves in a more desperate time to solve this issue. Because we've had 2 years where kids did not learn as much as we would have loved for them to be learning. So as a side note, I think this is the hardest one to talk about, right? Like, I don't know all the answers about growth, and it's really challenging. Like, we spend every day thinking about how we can get our kids to grow. So I don't know all the answers. So since I don't know all the answers, let's take a test, all right? So get out a piece of paper, number your paper 1 through 6, grab that number 2 pencil, and I want you to write down the questions as well as the answers as we go. All right? Number your paper 1 through 6. And on this test, you're going to grade your own work as we go. And also, you decide how many points each question is worth, and you decide how many points you get, because remember, I told you I don't know the answers anyway, right? All right, question number 1, true or false? We want students to make extraordinary growth at school. Go ahead and talk about that one. Hopefully it doesn't take too long. Copy off your neighbor. True or false? So I'm assuming at an innovation conference that you would give me a t-shirt that looks something like this just for asking a question like that, right? But the challenge is we all know that we're going to go back to our schools tomorrow and we don't have data to prove that all of our kids are making extraordinary growth. So that's the challenge. That is the problem that we are living in every day, is that we all are naive enough to believe that our kids can make extraordinary growth, and we are hit in the face with data every day to prove that we're not making it happen. Question number 2, and you can really talk about this one at your table. What does extraordinary growth even mean? Go ahead and spend a minute talking about that. And as you're talking about that question, it might be helpful to go ahead and look at number 3. What does ordinary growth mean? And what's the difference between extraordinary growth and ordinary growth? Okay, question number 4. How do we help teachers know that extraordinary growth is happening in their classrooms every day? And I'm going to add a 4.5 question. How do we help students know that they are making extraordinary growth in their classes every single day? Go ahead and chat about that one for a second. So I told you I don't know all the answers, and I'm not going to give you the answers to these, but I want you to help me think about them. And if you know the answer to these questions, I'm going to be around until about 1:45 today. So please tell me the answers that you have written down if you know them. But the truth is, we all know that we're spending instructional minutes every day on things that our kids already know. And I also don't believe that we have teachers that are doing this on purpose, right? So how do we help them stop this? Just a few thoughts that I have. Questions that we need to be thinking about is what data are we tracking and discussing and also celebrating? What words are we using to describe success at school? I think some of our kids feel like the things that we measure are the things that they are worst at. So we need to be thinking about what are the things that we're measuring and affirming at school. And I wonder sometimes, is our focus of proficiency getting in the way of our ability to measure progress? James Nottingham, this time last year, talked a whole lot about progress. He encouraged us to take all of the papers off our classroom walls, our demonstrations of student work, and to take all of that work off of our refrigerators in our houses and put up twice as much. Because he wanted us to show the pre-test and the post-test. He wanted us to show the pre-art piece and then the art piece that happened after the instruction so that kids could be thinking about the progress that they're making. And also an important question is, how might we help teachers measure and focus on progress and growth rather than that proficiency in their classroom? I feel like in my state anyway, if you're a struggling school, which usually reflects poverty, what happens is you get shame and blame, and your name gets in the newspaper for all the wrong reasons, and it's totally proficiency focused. And then we, unfortunately, push that into our classrooms sometimes. And in the climate we have where we can't find enough teachers, we need to figure out how to celebrate the progress that we're making. So last question. Actually, not the last question. So my opinion is that each student can make extraordinary growth, right? So how do we make that happen? And raise your hand if you think that's true or false. True or false? Each student can make extraordinary growth. Raise your hand if true. Awesome. What research do we have to support that? So here's the answer. John Carroll. John Carroll was an important guy when I did my dissertation study. In 1963, he did a study, or he came out with a theory that was his model for learning. And what John Carroll said was the amount of learning that happens is a proportion between the time it takes, the time spent, over the amount of time students need to learn. Right? So the time needed over the time that is actually spent over the time needed to learn. What he called that time needed to learn was aptitude. And what's interesting about aptitude, by his definition, is that he called that a measurement of learning rate, not a measurement of learning potential. So as far as I know, John Carroll is the first person to help us understand that all students can learn. Also, at Eastern Hancock, we've really looked hard at the words we use. And we've kind of fallen in love with this word each. A lot of times we use the words all or every, and we believe that like all and every mean just enough to make the grown-ups feel good about themselves. But what we really want to look at is each individual one. And so I challenge you to take that word each back to your district as you're thinking about your students and growth. Last question. Under what conditions is extraordinary growth for each student possible? Go ahead and chat about that quickly at your table. Awesome. I'm going to go back to John Carroll again. John Carroll said there's 4 factors. He said all students can learn when, number 1, they're able to understand their learning goals. So there's a lot of difficult components of this. Raise your hand if you were able to catch Amy Abel yesterday. Amy Abel talked a lot about creating conditions in your school where all of your students are able to access those learning goals. Number 2, they are engaged in their learning experiences. Number 3, they are willing to persevere in their learning. And number 4, they have time that they need to learn. So we're going to look at those one at a time. Number 1, we know that learning, like truly what learning is connecting the known to the unknown. We've all seen that picture of the synapses in your brain firing and connecting the things we know to the things that we don't know. That's what learning is. So students cannot meet their learning goals if they aren't able to connect the known to the unknown. Number 2, they are engaged in the learning activities. Schletzky is my favorite thinker about engagement because he tries to tell us that a lot of our kids aren't engaged in their classroom. They're either strategically compliant or they're ritually compliant. Number 3 is all students can learn when they're willing to persevere in their learning. So Jacqueline Eccles, James Nottingham reminded us of her last year. Jacqueline has this thing called the expectancy value theory, where she says that effort, the amount of effort somebody is willing to produce or put into something, is a multiplication number. It's how much do they value that thing times how well do they expect to do at it. And last but not least is time. We know that our kids learn at different rates, right? So also, I don't know what the narrative is in Arkansas as much as I do in Indiana, but there's a lot of narrative in Indiana that this should be the only thing we're thinking about. I heard lots of people yesterday talk to me about this is the first time they've ever heard about joy at school, and that being a focus. And that makes me a little sad because I think it should be something that we are intentional about. And so what I would tell you is if I don't have any of the answers, I said that from the beginning, but what I truly believe is that if we are going to help all of our kids grow, then we also have to be thinking really hard about joy, connection, and success. That if we can't do those things well, we're also not going to get much growth. I also know that this is very hard. And here's the reason that I know this is very, very hard. These are the kids that I live with. They're a few years older now, right? So Riley was born, and we had heard parents tell us that were older than us that, hey, this parenting thing is hard. You're probably not going to be able to go out to eat for a while. And I'm telling you guys, she was the model baby. We could take her anywhere. And my wife Taylor and I thought we were superior parents. We thought we're educators. We are just gifted at this parenting thing. And then 4 years later, Eli was born, and I don't think we've been out to eat in 8 years. This is what life is like every day. This picture is perfect. So this is so hard. But it's also so important because all of the parents that are sending their kids to you every day, they don't know that it might be true that 40 to 60% of this time that they're spending is on things that their kids may or may not already know. They're assuming when they send their babies to us that we're helping them grow as much as we possibly can. And so my challenge to you is to be as good at that as possible, which is always going to feel like it's not quite enough. But the last thing I want to leave you with is this. This is one of my favorite tweets I've ever seen, and it's actually a tweet from Scott Harrison, who founded the Charity Water. He has an awesome book. But if you look at the quote, it says, "Do not be afraid of work that has no end." And I think that is the work that we're doing. It's work that has no end. Thank you so much for having me this morning. I look forward to meeting all of you throughout the day. Thank you so much.